And hear ye, I will call this Willits City Council meeting of June 28th to order. We'll start with a pledge to the flag. Virginia, would you like to lead us tonight? Thank you. You going to start us out?
Sure.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Dolores, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Strong? Rodriguez? Present. Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Here.
Mayor Pine?
Yes. All right. We'll start with public communications. The City Council welcomes participation in its meetings. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person so that everyone has an opportunity to address the Council. To expedite matters and avoid repetition, whenever any group of persons wishes to address the Council on the same subject matter, the Mayor may request the group appoint a spokesperson. This item is limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the City Council, which are not on the posted agenda. Public criticism of the Council, Commission, boards, and agencies will not be prohibited. The City Council can take no action on non-agendized items. Is there anyone here tonight who would like to speak to the Council regarding a non-agendized item? No. Did we receive any emails, Dolores?
We did not.
Okay. All right, well, we will close public communications and move on to public matters. This evening we have a presentation on the Great Redwood Trail Master Plan. Welcome, Louisa.
Yes.
And if you could come to the podium and state your name for the record, introduce yourself. You don't have to adjust the microphone, it's there to pick up for the camera.
Oh, okay.
Keyboard out of your way too.
Okay. The keyboard is to control the
slideshow. I guess I can
up and down button.
keep it. Okay. My name is Louisa Morris. I work for the State Coastal Conservancy. I'm one of the project managers for the Great Redwood Trail project, and so I have a PowerPoint presentation tonight on the project to share information with you. And thank you very much for making me feel welcome and for inviting me to speak to you this evening. I've had the privilege of working with several of your staff people and some of you as well in the past. So I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about where we're at with the Great Redwood Trail project and specifically more about the master plan. So it's going to be kind of a high-level overview, recognizing that the City of Willits is an amazing partner in this project, in that they're already advanced in the planning stages of building a 1.6-mile segment in the city limits. So we've been working really closely with Dusty and others, with Brian and Davey as well, on some of the issues in the Willits yard, and also on the planning, and my agency is a funder for this project, and so we are going to be taking something to our board for consideration that will fund a portion of the Willits project. So stepping back from that, and I'd like to share with you a little bit about the master plan. So the Great Redwood Trail is envisioned as a 316-mile multi-use rail trail project that will connect San Francisco to Humboldt Bay. It follows the former and now inactive North Coast Railroad Authority rail line. And it's envisioned that it will transform this rail corridor into a community asset and an economic engine for the North Coast. I did bring some maps if you want a map of the length of the trail, but it's basically, there's a map on this slide. And today, there's about 28 miles of the trail that are complete. Many of the completed segments are in urban areas and up around Humboldt Bay and Ukiah and Soon and Willits. They connect shops, restaurants, public spaces for residents and tourists, as well as serve as a transportation corridor. So a little bit about rail trails. They are multi-use public paths that are created for former railroad corridors. It's a model used across the country. There's over 25,000 miles in the US, with over 1,000 miles in California. And once the Great Redwood Trail is completed, it will be the longest rail trail in the United States. Rail trails support recreation, economic development, tourism, and environmental restoration in towns and rural areas. And we have a couple of slides here showing some completed rail trails. At the top is the Olympic Discovery Trail. It's 135 miles on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. And the Biz Johnson Trail is 25 miles long, and it's in Lassen County, and it follows the Susan River. The fonts got changed a little bit. We're getting a little bit of a font circus, but that happens sometimes when you go across platforms. So a little bit of background. In 1998, the Northwestern Pacific Railroad ceased its operations, and there was an embargo on portions of the line because it was too, especially in the Eel River Canyon, it was too unsafe for traffic. And so in 2001, the Humboldt Bay Trail plan was completed, and the partners around the Humboldt Bay, Arcata, the city of Eureka, and the county, have been working on that. And the last little bit it just broke ground about a month ago. And in 2018, the Senate Bill 1029 ordered that the state do some feasibility studies and work with consultants to do those studies of the feasibility of transforming this old rail line into a trail. They found it was feasible, and so McGuire led the passing of Senate Bill 69, the Great Redwood Trail Act, in 2021. There were three main things that this did. It transferred the Sonoma and Marin part of the old rail line to SMART. It created the Great Redwood Trail Agency, which is the successor agency to the North Coast Rail Authority, and it required that the rail corridor be preserved via rail banking. And so in 2022, the Coastal Conservancy hired 2 project managers, one of whom is myself. We rail banked from across the street, East Commercial Street North, and we also kicked off the master plan last October. And we expect the master plan to be complete in around February of next year. And it has a huge and very robust community engagement plan. It also will have, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what the master plan will include. So the team, it's a broad consultant team, and it's focused on the 231 miles of the Great Redwood Trail that are north of Cloverdale. So the old rail line in Mendocino, Trinity, and Humboldt County. The Coastal Conservancy is my employer, the funder, and Alta received the master plan contract, and they have a whole bunch of local community groups that are helping with the community engagement pieces. North Coast Opportunities, Redwood Community Action Agency, and a woman named Jen Rice, who's very active in Humboldt County. So this kind of just shows you who all the different partners are. Some of them probably look familiar because they've helped with the Willits Rail Trail segment as well. So the master plan will develop recommendations and policies for the whole trail corridor, so it's pretty high level. It doesn't focus on the details of individual sections and projects. That will come later. So it includes guidance on the partners who will build and maintain sections of the trail. It will identify funding opportunities, offer design options, include some trail surface suggestions, where we think it maybe should be paved, where it might be a hard pack 3/4 inch gravel surface, and where it might just be like a backcountry trail type of experience. The master plan will also identify strategies for protecting cultural and natural resources, and the master plan includes very extensive tribal engagement efforts that will continue for the life of the project. So this is just the beginning. And there's also information in the master plan. There will be on operations and maintenance strategies and funding, trail design, As I said, cultural, natural resource protection, opportunities for habitat restoration, project prioritization recommendations, and potential funding sources. So the community engagement is, there's a community engagement plan that's in the master plan, but we're doing tribal engagement, in-person, virtual community meetings. We did one in Willits. Several of you were there at the meeting. And it was really, really fun, that meeting, because Willits had its own table where they could talk about the specifics of the Willits project, which is really great. It includes small group stakeholder meetings. I just got back from Larrabee. That's why I'm in my field clothes. And we met with some landowners up in, if you know where Larrabee is, it's across the river from Founders Grove. And it's in Humboldt County. Most of the year there's no bridge, so you have to go all the way up and around, almost to Scotia to get to Larrabee. It's about an hour south from Scotia, but they just put the bridge in, so you could go across it. It's very beautiful. We also have online surveys, comment forms, an interactive website, and we're tabling at certain events. We'll be at the Willits Frontier Days. So far what we're hearing from folks is that they're concerned about trespassing, security, safety, fire, encampments, and impacts that the trail might have on working lands, like ranching lands and farming lands. And that people want to see river access. They want to see connections to neighborhoods, so you can get onto the trail from different neighborhoods and businesses and parts of different towns it goes through. And also economic development opportunities. How can existing businesses make money from this project, and what additional businesses might there be, entrepreneurial opportunities. Okay. Now I want to share the findings of our economic impact report, which outlines benefits to cities and communities along the GRT. And this assumes that the Great Redwood Trail is complete. So that's where these numbers come from. We finished this benefit assessment, or our consultant did, in January 2023. And what it did is the study can be found on the master plan website, so it's greatredwoodtrailplan.org. It has the methodology in it. But broadly, they use benchmarks for economic growth from similar trails across the U.S., and they estimated local and visitor trail use and benefits by jurisdiction, including cities and unincorporated county areas. So I pulled out for this particular, I'm going to tell you what the economic benefit study found broadly, and then specifically for Willits and the outlying areas in Mendocino County. So it's over, once the trail's complete, the economic benefits are projected for the 3-county area that the master plan covers to be over $102 million annually. And those are broken down into a little under $62 million recreation, tourism, and retail benefits, 38 million health benefits, and then 2.4 million in transportation benefits. And I'll explain now what those are. So the recreation and tourism benefits include things like restaurants, retail, entertainment, rentals, lodging, and also bed tax. So those are the revenues that go into that number. In terms of health benefits, those are more about reduced health care costs because of people using the trail, health care cost savings, mortality reduction, because there's a safe, active transportation recreation opportunity for residents and visitors. And finally, the transportation benefits come from, include reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, reductions in road maintenance costs, congestion, crashes, household vehicle operations costs. So that's the smallest of all of the numbers, but there still is a benefit for that. So for the city of Willits, the annual Economic benefit estimated of the completed trail, there's 2 miles total in the city of Willits proper, is a little over, well, it's just under 2.7 million a year. And that's broken down into the recreation, tourism, and retail benefits. So the economic benefits directly from businesses, and then transportation and health benefits. And you can see there the transient occupancy tax is factored in as well. So the whole of Mendocino County would be, the economic benefit analysis shows it making 49 million benefit related to the trail per year. That includes Willits, that includes Ukiah. So that is for the entirety of Mendocino County. So as I was saying, back to the master plan, there's lots of opportunities to get engaged. And we had a workshop in Willits. Our next workshops will be in Alder Point, and I have a flyer for that if you're interested, and Hopland at the end of July, so July 26th and 7th. And then for each of these community workshops in person, we also do an online workshop, so that'll be on August 2nd. We're also tabling at the Willits Frontier Days and doing some others at Big Times, which are offered by the tribes. There's one, I think, or there was just one at Redwood Valley and Coyote Valley. And then the Mendocino County Fair. And if you look at our website, you can also see more information on future events.
When you say you'll be tabling at Frontier Days, do you have a specific Frontier Days event in mind where you'll be doing that?
You know, the North Coast Opportunities is in charge of doing the tabling, so I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
I can ask them and get back to you if you would like.
My guess is that they'll probably be here this Friday at our hometown celebration.
Yeah, I'll check. I can find out. So I'm sorry, I don't know that. And then there's also the Great Redwood Trail Plan website where you can sign up for a newsletter, take a survey, interact with our web map, and make your comments there. There are also phone numbers and emails for the public to comment. And here is my contact information, also the contact information for some of the project partners. The main contact right now at NCO is Roseanne Ibarra, and Radhika Misri is also working on the project, as well as Sarah Marshall.
Great.
So, questions, comments?
Are they actually removing the rails from the whole thing?
That is a good question, and the master plan will have recommendations about that. I think that if it is a rail to trail conversion, possibly. So it just depends on if it's going to be a paved surface, then, and the right-of-way is only 60 feet wide and it's crowned where the rail is, then my guess is that possibly we would be taking out the rails and the ties as well. But I also saw some sections in the Eel River Canyon where the rails were left in place, and someone, I think probably one of the adjacent property owners, had crowned gravel in between the rails, and it made a really nice walking surface.
Oh.
So the rail can almost be like a retaining wall for the fill. So I think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. You know, there's also places in the Eel River Canyon where the rails are hanging in the air, and you obviously, if you're not able to fly, you're not going to be able to walk on that. So the rail, though, is steel, and it's good steel, and so it's worth money. So if
So are the ties.
Yeah, the ties, you think the ties are too? Yeah, the ties might be, in some cases.
I just wondered who would get the contract on that, because they could go in and, take the rails and the ties out and,
Well, we have had some, I'm sorry, did you finish? Did you want to say something else?
No, just that.
Okay. There is some rails and ties coming out in the project up around Humboldt Bay right now. And they do have values, so we're requiring that the contractor return them to us for disposal. So it's not like I think wherever we can salvage those, that the Great Redwood Trail Agency wants to capture the value of that material. Yeah. It's a good question. Other questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me.
All right, our next item under public matters is an update from the Little Lake Fire Protection District. We have a written update that was included in the packet. And then we also actually have a memo that was received this morning. So I'd like to read this aloud. This is just a reminder as we approach the 4th of July that fireworks are illegal in Mendocino County. The Mendocino County Office of Emergency Services would like to remind all Mendocino County residents and visitors that fireworks are illegal throughout the county. As we approach the 4th of July holiday, please remember we are now in fire season and it is dry in all areas of the county. The illegal use of fireworks poses a serious threat to the safety and well-being of everyone here. CAL FIRE and local fire and law enforcement agencies are working together to enforce a zero-tolerance policy regarding the use and sale of illegal fireworks in the county this year. Please do your part to help protect Mendocino County from another devastating wildfire by celebrating the 4th of July safely and responsibly. For fireworks enthusiasts, there are safe, organized, professional fireworks displays scheduled in Fort Bragg, Point Arena, and Ukiah this year. The Fort Bragg Independence Day Fireworks Show will be on Saturday, July 1st at Todd Point in Fort Bragg. The Point Arena Fireworks Extravaganza will be also Saturday, July 1st at Arena Cove. And the Fireworks Extravaganza at Ukiah Speedway will be Saturday, July 1st at the Ukiah Speedway. We wish everyone a wonderful and safe 4th of July. All right, next up is item 4. We have no ordinances to enact this evening, so we'll move on to the consent calendar. Before us tonight are the minutes from the June 14th City Council meeting. Does anyone from the council have anything to say regarding those minutes?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Does anyone from the public have any comments to make about the June 14th minutes? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Dolores, may we have a roll call?
Councilmember Rodriguez? Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes, thank you. All right, moving on to monthly activity reports. We have a business license activity report included in the packet. These matters do not require action by the City Council but are of public interest. We also have a building activity report for May of 2023. Anyone interested is encouraged to go online to the city's website. Item 7, we have nothing under commissions, agencies, and authorities, so we'll be moving on to our city manager reports and recommendations. The first is regarding the East Commercial Street corridor plan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Sam Bickell from Terrain Architects. He has a presentation that we will go through, highlighting the work that has been accomplished to date regarding the East Commercial Street corridor master planning effort. The item that is before you tonight for your consideration is basically the first phase. Rod Wilburn, who's in the audience as well, was also a key advocate and participant in this planning effort. And what we were looking to do was strategically, we broke up the project. So the first phase is a data collection, inventory, site analysis, kind of what if type of scenario, see what we can do with the landscape we have out there, the street corridor, the street, the public realm elements that we can slate for, identify for improvements. As Sam goes through his presentation, if there's any questions from the council, the public will be more than happy to answer them. Ultimately, what we would like the council to do with this item tonight is to accept the plan that has been done to date. There is a hard copy. And we have received comments from the one public forum that was held. It was good comments. The revised draft of the document includes those comments. So it's a good footnote of how the comments that we received, how they were integrated to address some of the issues in the first or earlier drafts of the document. Ultimately, if the council so choose and you feel there's merit in this effort, we would like to have approval to continue to the next phase, which would be the final planning effort. And Sam and I have been in quick discussions. Sam identified a grant opportunity that may be available for the city to pursue funding for the planning effort. So with that, Sam is ready.
All right. Mayor Khan, council members, thank you so much for having me. My name is Sam Bickel. I'm with Terrain Landscape Architecture out of Ashland, Oregon. And today I'm going to be presenting our report on the East Commercial Street Corridor. As Brian mentioned, this is the first part of a two-part master planning process. So tonight I'm going to be going over our initial assessment, our preliminary recommendations, and then also the feedback that we got from the community. One thing that I'd like to recognize whenever we go through one of these exercises is that for each city that we work with, we love delving into the history of the city, seeing how it was formed, the industries that it was formed around, so that as we move forward in these exercises, we can recognize that and integrate that and use that history in our design. Yes?
Jim?
I'm sorry.
I believe if you're going to go step by step, even though I don't believe that this personally, I have somewhat of a conflict of interest. Should I go sit in the audience or should I stay seated here?
Well, if this is within 500 feet of real property that you own and it could result in a financial benefit to you, a significant material financial benefit to you, then you should recuse yourself from the discussion.
Go ahead.
But does it directly impact her more than it would any other property or business owner along the corridor?
The reason I feel like it might is because my property is identified specifically in this particular slideshow.
Oh.
So even if it's just for perception, I think it would be appropriate for me to step aside.
All right.
So is it appropriate for me to sit in the audience and say nothing and just watch, or where is
when you declare a conflict, best practice is for you to leave the room and to return
after the
the action is
presentation?
taken.
Okay.
We'll call you back in, Sabrina.
All right.
Thank you for your transparency.
So this report concerns the East Commercial Street Corridor from Main Street to Highway 101. When we were looking at our boundary, we took kind of a half block offset from East Commercial Street, and then also included kind of the civic area, Bud Snyder Park, and then also the baseball complex at the end. So those kind of expanded beyond, but in context, I think it makes sense. We also looked to start at all of the amenities, at all of the civic institutions, at all of the businesses along the corridor, because as we continue with this process, obviously, each of these institutions, businesses, and organizations is going to be important in how we approach all of our solutions. So to start, we looked at land use and what we have in each of these sections. So we divided it into three sections based on land use. The first section, Section A, which is Main Street to the railroads next to the skunk train, is primarily residential, and civic, and there's some commercial as well. The next section, which is the railroads to Lenore, is like heavy commercial and industrial. There are two civic institutions. There's the Mendocino County Community College, as well as the Willits Elementary Charter School that are at the end. And then Section C is primarily the youth baseball recreation complex, as well as the library, the Mendocino County Museum, Roots of Power. So I'm going to briefly touch on existing conditions because you all live here and you know the conditions along the corridor. But in the report, we go into a lot more detail on each of these items that we have numbered. But we identified issues with ADA, issues with pavement. We assessed each of the park's facilities, pavement, playground structures. We looked at empty tree wells where we have sidewalk upheaval. Those are kind of some of the primary concerns in Section A. Section B is really just concentrated on the street frontage, so where we're missing trees, where we have some ADA issues. And then Section C, we went through the whole complex, assessed pavement, assessed all of the amenities and the structures, looked at drainage issues, looked at playground structures in Recreation Grove Park. So we did have a community feedback session in this room. We had about 15 people show up. The format was we had boards set up. We started people just with an overview of the corridor and the area that we were looking at, and we asked them to just initial thoughts or impressions on things that they would want to, what improvements that they would want to see, even before they saw our recommendations or the categories of recommendations that we created, because we wanted to get, just an initial impression without kind of the bias of our study. And by and large, the comments were for traffic calming, lighting, and shade. Those are really important ones. There's some more stuff mixed in about things that we needed to add to the maps, or speed bumps or crosswalks that people didn't like. But those really three things aligned with what we, all of the recommendations that we gave and kind of the direction that we went with the remainder of the report. So in order to kind of organize our recommendations, we developed 6 categories based on the data that we got: street crossings and improvements, gateways and transition points, parking lot improvements, park facility improvements, lighting improvements, and destination gatherings. So these were just kind of a framework for future phasing and trying to look at how we could break apart each of these aspects into different easily accessible categories. So for streets, alleys, and crossings, we identified where streetscape improvements would be needed, as well as potential street crossings, pedestrian pavement improvements, as well as we have recommendations on moving the fill station that's located in the old fields across the street to the skate park, so it's a little more accessible and safer for access and for people in the corridor. Traffic calming is really important. There was a traffic study done in the youth baseball complex that showed that 30% of traffic that goes through that area is over the speed limit. When we got community feedback, traffic calming was the biggest thing that people identified. We talked to multiple community members that said that, everybody speeds through it. We just go through it. It's like, it's just a force of habit, right? And so we had identified a couple of structures that could be implemented. People liked to raise crosswalks. They liked to improve streetscapes. We got comments on improving striping along the street. The next category was gateways and transition points. This was looking at, so when I first came into town and drove down the corridor, when you get to Main Street Commercial, you have no idea of everything that's down at the other end. And so we wanted to identify kind of strategic locations where we could put signage and wayfinding to guide people down the corridor so that they would go to the end, and maybe somebody that's just visiting would know, oh, if I turn here, there's the Mendocino County Museum, Roots of Powers down there, there's all this other stuff. So the spot number 1 is obviously just kind of a signage like saying, oh, what's down at the other end. The number 2 that we identified we thought was important because it's kind of at that juncture between our Section A and our Section B, where at the railroads, if you're just visiting and you look down, what you see is heavy commercial and industrial. And in most cities, that's kind of like, that's the end of the city. There's nothing beyond that. And so we thought that if we provided some kind of a signage that pointed people to go, hey, keep going, there's some cool stuff down here, that would be helpful to get people down to the youth baseball complex. But then also at number 3, just kind of a gateway to like, oh, here's the baseball complex. This is this awesome civic space that we have, where we have all of these institutions, it's just kind of like celebrating that area. This was not a very popular thing with the community. I think because it's signage. People like the idea of having a signage package. It's something that we would want to develop, referencing the Willits sign that you already have, looking at ways that we can take its form and its character and colors so that we can kind of connect the rest of our signage with that identity. Our next category, public and private parking. This is really just looking at parking lots that could use shade trees. We recommended that the city look at coverage requirements or maybe incentives for property owners to put trees in their parking lots. Just helps with the general health and well-being, reducing the urban heat island effects, makes things cooler, and also improves the aesthetics and character of the city overall. Shade, the community really kind of honed in. We didn't get any people that liked the images, but we did have several people that talked about just improvements of shade in parking lots, and especially in parks, which is our next category. We went through each park and just gave recommendations on facility improvements and playground improvements. The first park that we went through was Snyder Park. So, we looked at restroom improvements, improvements to the playground structures, safety surfacing. There's an absence of shade in the park, and plantings and shelter. By and large, the community also, members that came in, those are things that were very popular with them. Park shelter, park lighting was really big, as well as upgrading the playground structures. And then also, I think we had a comment about community gardens on this one, which was pretty cool. The next park that we touched on was Recreation Grove Park. And this is kind of more the same of improving the restroom facilities, looking at the park shelter. It's also what the community kind of honed in on, which was restroom, park lighting, park shelter. As well as someone wanted to rebuild the barbecue. It was actually someone wanted that twice. And then also there was some concern about the removal of trees and that we make sure that trees are put back in, so we maintain the character of Recreation Grove. With the youth and baseball field complex, we looked at, again, at improvements to restrooms, improvements to the existing, the old fields, expansion of fields, because we know that we need more soccer and baseball fields to be functional to meet all the demands that are constantly increasing. We had one community member that put all of their, we gave everyone at the beginning, we gave everyone 8 dots, and they could go around and they placed them on pictures. And so one community member put 7 of their dots on disc golf, because they really, really want disc golf. There's already a plan for disc golf, so I kind of felt like, they wasted their dots. But that's why that's one at the very top. Other than that, sports field lighting in this area is really important. It's something that we should be looking at. It would just increase the usability. You could have games at night, more people, more families. We also suggested maybe looking at some kind of a playground that could go in the baseball complex, so that families with small children would have a place that they could take their kids to blow off steam between games and keep them active and hopefully tired. And then also field expansions were popular with the community, seating. We had community garden here, and then we also suggested since this is kind of a sports complex, there could be a place for maybe a basketball court, pickleball court, just so that we kind of have these multiple recreational activities going on in this area. Lighting improvements, these are kind of all covered by the community and all of our previous boards and slides. So we didn't get a lot of comments on this, but we looked at pedestrian lighting, park lighting, street lighting, and identified areas that could use improvements. Again, community, we didn't get a lot of comments, although people wanted dark sky friendly lights. Crosswalk lights were also, we got a couple of comments about people that wanted lit crosswalks for safety, and then better pedestrian lighting. Sorry, I'm blowing through this. I know I have 15 minutes. So
I have a quick question for you. Do you know if the folks who were in attendance were residents of the city?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, because I heard from multiple community members who live outside of city limits, and I just wondered if the participants who actually showed up were residents.
To my knowledge, there was one person in the meeting that was from outside the city limits.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So for this category of recommendations, destinations, we were looking at kind of the destinations that are already there that could use improvements, ways that we could improve them, whether that's through public art, or creating an urban plaza, murals. This is kind of looking at how can we make, like for instance, Roots of Power or the Mendocino County Museum have a better street presence, be more inviting, have a place maybe in front of it where people could hang out, you know, before going in or after going in, or a place to have lunch. Community members like the idea of public murals, of creating an urban square and public art. And we also got a couple comments on putting the farmers market back into Bud Snyder Park. The main complaint being that, like, once all the trees got taken down, you know, it got really hot, but people would like to see the shade brought back in, more trees planted, shelter, and then also the farmers market brought back to that area. So this, like Brian mentioned, this is the first part of a two-part process. We have completed our initial assessment and preliminary recommendations. We had one community meeting, and kind of the next steps would be acceptance of this master plan scope and the action plan. Then we would work to establish kind of a framework for moving forward. We would look at developing design guidelines for the corridor so that we can maintain the same character down the entire corridor. And then also further engaging with the multiple committees. I know that there's the Blue Zone Committee that's looking at complete streets, which is something that in our report that we love and we would want to implement. And then there's also like the Willits Wayfinding Committee. And we're approached by a couple of other community members that, you know, have kind of vested interest, and we would like to keep those dialogues going so that people are invested and feel good about what's happening. Are there any questions? Yes.
Are we going to do this in sections, or are we going to do this in like the lighting or the crosswalks or whatever, in individual things? Are we going to do it as a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the whole thing that's in that group?
So for organizing all of the categories and recommendations, we broke it out into that 6, but this master plan, it would be a comprehensive master plan that then could be phased out into different projects depending on grant opportunities. So that's kind of the idea, was that we would create this comprehensive master plan that incorporates all of these categories into one document, and then we could look at, you know, each little section, like maybe in Bud Snyder Park, there would be a grant that we could get for lighting or for park shelters, right? And so we could just use that document to pursue additional funds and grants.
And is the city going to pay for this, or are they going to get a grant, or how is this going to happen?
So we found a grant through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that targets rural communities, and so we're going to be applying for that grant to pay for the design services.
Would it pay for the whole thing?
To my knowledge, it would. Yeah, if we get it.
It would pay for the plan, the creation of the master plan. It wouldn't pay for the implementation.
Right. It wouldn't pay for the implementation.
Oh.
It's just for the planning.
I think what Larry is getting
Yeah,
at is how will we
I'm trying to get who's going to start the cat and start this thing going.
Who's going to pay for implementation is what he's wondering.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if I can respond to that. If we complete the master plan, a lot of grant opportunities require essentially the planning process already completed. So by having the plan in place, it's considered almost shovel-ready that we have planning components, some design work, maybe some preliminary engineering, just rough concepts that we can unfold and present during a grant process. So we get the grant, we get to complete the master plan, proceed through the planning process, have it adopted by the council, then it's in place and we can use that as a tool to go after grant opportunities. And then we also can have set aside some general fund activity funding to implement some items as well.
Jerry, did you have a question?
Actually, Brian answered it.
All right.
Okay.
Anything else from council? I'd like to give the public an opportunity to ask you any questions while you're still here. Anybody out there have questions? Louisa? I think for the camera you need to come up and give your question up here.
Thank you, Sam. Just wondering if there is going to be some wayfinding, design, signage guidelines associated with the Great Redwood Trail too. So just integrating that into the part of Commercial Street that would be affected by that. So just more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, I can touch on that. Yeah. So we do know that there are multiple projects that are kind of going along, coinciding with our effort, and we do want to engage with them and make sure that whatever we do incorporates those efforts into our final master plan. So yes, the Rails to Trail project, the Great Redwood Trail project, we would definitely, that would be a component of it, and looking at where that connection is, and then also yeah.
And Dusty knows all that.
Yeah, we'll hang out.
Yeah, we'll communicate.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public with a question? Well, thank you so much for the presentation and for the work so far. It's exciting.
Thank you all.
Yeah. All right. Brian, did you have anything to add to that, or can we move on to item B?
Oh, I think tell you what, I would like to make a motion to adopt the accompanying resolution, thereby accepting these Commercial Street Corridor Community Outreach and Program Development, and authorize the city manager to prepare a master plan for adoption for the city council.
All right, we have a motion. I will second.
Okay.
Dolores, may we have a roll call?
Councilmember Stransky?
I have no.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Connie?
Yes.
That enough?
Can someone call Sabrina back into the room?
That passed.
Yeah, I don't know
Larry's
if that...
vote was what?
He voted no, so do we have enough votes to pass the motion?
It was a quorum.
Yeah, we had a quorum. We have a quorum of 4, but now we've had
One abstention.
3 participating.
Right.
And I think we needed a unanimous vote of the remaining 3.
Right. So it did not pass.
Did not pass.
Okay. All right. And we'll wait to move on to item B until Sabrina has returned. All right, and Sabrina, just to get you up to date, I wanted to let you know that the presentation was given. It was not accepted by the council by a majority, and so therefore the city manager is not authorized to prepare a master plan for the East Commercial Street Corridor project. Okay, great. Item B is a possible adoption of a resolution to approve a non-binding memorandum of understanding between the city and Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians. Brian.
Okay. Previously, the council considered another non-binding exploratory memorandum of understanding between the city and Pine Mountain Water Company. This is in a similar vein. This is another group that has a history of coordination with the city regarding water supplies to their community and some of their development projects that are in the immediate area. This is an item that has gone through significant review at the Water Wastewater Committee, breaking down what the merits of this request is, what we're looking at the different phases, and the expectations from the two parties between Sherwood Valley and the city. So once again, this is not committing the city to provide potable water services or supplies to this entity. Basically, what this does is acknowledges that we were entering into a non-binding exploratory arrangement with Sherwood Valley. They are intending to pursue funding opportunities that would allow us to do some technical feasibility studies of how we can provide water for their needs.
If we could provide one.
If the question is answered, what opportunities are for the city to attain funding through their provisions to upgrade our water distribution, water production capability. So if we do get to a point where the council is considering into a separate agreement that would provide water supplies, that there is reassurance that we will continue to meet our current supplies to current count holders and still meet the demands or the expectations that Sherwood Valley would be asking for.
Anyone from council have questions for our city manager?
Just to reaffirm that the Water Wastewater Committee meeting, when the, I guess it wasn't the tribe, but their housing representative, is that correct, Rob?
That's correct.
And concern I had was what happens if we're in a water conservation mode, and they explained that currently the Sherwood housing complex that's in place the other side of Della, that whenever we've implemented our water conservation, they, through their housing management, implement that on them. So they're bound by that also.
You bring up a very good point as we're looking at these MOUs, is that they're concerning, just as we are, if they want us to be in an MOU with
Because that
them.
was my concern, was that, hey, I would hate to see that city residents are having to conserve, yet folks can turn the spigot. They said that they would be bound. I think they'd be different than Pine Mountain in one respect, in that they would just be buying the water from us, but they would be bound by the same. Is that correct, Rod? Yeah. So kind of like, I guess the best example I could give is kind of like Wagon Wheel. There's one spigot hypothetically in there, and then they deal with their customers there. But in their case, the spigot would be out in the valley.
So would they then count as one new account or as many new accounts as they are serving?
I would look to Rod. Would that be a separate one? Yeah. I just want, once again, as you're approaching the podium, Rod Wilburn, like I said earlier, we would not present, staff would not present to the council and the general public if it was unable to provide what the request is without compromising our current ability to provide to current capacity levels or demands. That is a very known fact, and Sherwood Valley completely understands that.
Madam Mayor, Council, Rod Wilburn, former city engineer, and also a member of the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians. I would first point out that what you're talking about is far down the road. Potential conditions, potential connections. Right now it's just, is it going to work? And should it work, it would be something where similar to the development on the west side, they're all individually metered. Whether they're individually metered or it's a single meter, it would be a number of connections. I would also point out that when Sherwood, in about 1990, when the development on the west side happened, Sherwood paid to upgrade the tank on Locust, increase the storage. Sherwood paid to, I think this was with the help of Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority, they paid to loop the water main from Locust to Meadowbrook with an 8-inch water main, and they also paid for a booster station near Blosser Lane. So similar to that, they would, well, in a combination, in this agreement, they would seek to potentially find funding to increase the city's capacity, conveyance, same as they did in 1990. And this is a housing development that's being planned and proposed. And there are some other nuances to this, but in general, right now, is it going to work? That's the MOU. Figuring out if it's possible. So I think when we talk about what happens in the future, yes, if it works out, they would be customers just the same as the Sherwood development on the west side, just the same as anybody else that's a customer outside the city limits right now.
So your comments that they would be looking to potentially fund or help fund the increase of capacity, you're meaning essentially our distribution system, but they wouldn't be able to create more water, right? So the question really is, do we think that there's enough water to add this as a potential to our...
But one option we talked about was they could help fund dredging of the reservoir, which would create more capacity. Okay. It would create the capacity that was once there, and when you start looking at the cost comparison and the funding available right now, partnering with the tribe to address this situation is a very strong position for the city and the tribe. So that's the purpose of the MOU. You can take this MOU, you can put it in front of the funding agencies and say, this is what we're hoping to do. So we need $2 million to dredge the reservoir and create, much more water than the development on the east side would ever use. Granted, over time that's a fluctuating number, but those improvements are possibilities under this type of agreement. Understanding.
And Rod, in that meeting you explained, or maybe Scott explained, that between the tules and the silt in the reservoir, that's something that, absent this agreement, our ratepayers would have to bear the brunt of that in the future of dealing with it.
Right now, the difference between there's about 40% of the Morris Reservoir capacity has been subsumed or consumed by sedimentation and other stuff. The published volume with the plans from 1927 with the state is 940 acre feet. Currently, it's about 660. So there's 280 acre feet of potential storage. And I want to call it low-hanging fruit, but it's not quite there because it's expensive. But relative to the amount of water you can get, it's far less expensive than raising a dam or building another reservoir, if we're looking at surface water. So when you balance those things, you don't have to get a permit other than whatever might be required to dispose of it. You don't have to get a permit for the reservoir. You don't have to get a permit for that capacity. Just have to do the work to get that sediment and get those tules out of the reservoir, and I think it's a good investment for long term, because if you don't do it now, that storage number is just going to continue to drop, and pretty soon you're going to have 600 acre feet, and I could extrapolate that. Go ahead.
But right now, there's no, when they get their water, they get it from the dam only. They do not get any water, cannot at present, do not get any underground water from us at all, the way it stands right now.
If it were to move forward and there was to be a connection on the east side, right now there is no way to get groundwater to that site. It would all be all surface water.
That's all I want to know. And then when we had this happen, and I was not on the council at this particular time, but when they did this with the tribe on the west side of town, they told
someplace in my mind, but maybe I was wrong, that they were a sovereign nation because that they were not covered by the rules that happened for the rest of us.
So that's a broad topic. That is true, sovereign nation. One of the things that's happening at the state level right now is a push. Well, let me back up. I don't know in what context that was used. It is true that if it's federal trust land, they are subject to different, on federal trust land, subject to different laws. It's a I would say a complex situation when you talk about off federal trust land. But what you're talking about right now is essentially a government-to-government discussion in an MOU, not an agency. And so it's not Pine Mountain. It's not an agency.
And we had a meeting last Wednesday saying that we want more population in the city of Willits. And so that's going to open up more water consumption from the people in the community if we get these things which we were talking about last Wednesday. So once again, I'll say it again, that once you open the tap, that you're dead in the water. That's my philosophy on it, okay? I've said everything that I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would just add just some more historic context. I mean, I heard it discussed prior. Yes, prior to the city owning the water facility, it was under private ownership, and prior to that, it was PG&E. Prior to that, it was a community system that was diverting water, if you look back to the early 1900s, diverting water from Davis Creek. That's how the city got senior water rights, pre-1914. So I think with that, from that perspective, a community water system that is geared towards serving the community, since those people that live outside of the city limits also work in town, they shop in town, they get gas in town, and their kids play sports in this town. So if you put yourself in that position, you have a much stronger, a much better leverage, you're in a much better leveraging position to get additional funding to improve the resiliency and improve the ability of the city to supply water to whomever becomes a customer.
Ron, can I ask a question based on what you just said? Mm-hmm. So in that position, I mean, all along we've had discussions, this council and other councils, regarding keeping senior water rights. And as the state tries to intrude on that, does that help us secure or tell the state we are good guardians of our water rights, and yes, we have senior water rights, but we're doing good by the community? I mean, I guess I'm just looking for what keeps the state at bay, I guess.
Well, I guess when we talk about funding to do anything, that's state taxpayer money, right? The city received millions of dollars in 2012, 2013, 2014 to upgrade the water treatment facility. The groundwater emergency $500,000 in 2015-16 for the emergency project. Recently $550,000 to replace the water main. In general, my understanding is that the tribal water rights supersede all Western water rights, whether they be senior or junior. So that partnership would make me think that type of partnership would improve the city's standing overall with the state. Does that make sense? Did I?
Yeah.
So I have a question, and I don't know if this is one that you can answer, Rod, but the staff report says the Water and Wastewater Committee reviewed the MOU at their May 18th meeting. The committee found no concerns with the MOU as presented and agreed to advise the council to adopt. But Larry is on the Water and Wastewater Committee, and it certainly sounds as if he has concerns. So what does this mean?
Once again, this item has been presented to that committee, I think probably the last 3 or 4 sessions. It's been an item, has gone through basically at the last meeting, a final draft was presented to the committee. There was a good amount of discussion. Basically, Member Stransky has voiced concerns throughout the process, but there was it was essentially consensus that presented to the council and let the council decide.
Okay. Okay.
And I just want to add and just build on comments made by Rod, is that from my perspective, the tribe has been a great partner, has brought this forward. They recognize that they have opportunities for funding that we would not have, and they recognize that they need housing. And what we heard last week, and as Dusty is working through the general plan update, this whole valley needs housing. If we have a resource that would help accommodate and support housing development, I think that's an opportunity we need to pursue and encourage.
Thank you. Does any other council member have questions for Rod or Brian?
Actually, can I ask one more question? Because I'm staring at Dusty as we just talked about housing. With something like this, even though the property would be tribal land out there, does it help or hurt us arena-wise in our numbers?
You had to go there. You had to go there.
No, I mean, I just don't know if that, is it one where we could leverage the county at some point and say we want to share those numbers with you?
I always appreciate when a council member is aware of REIT numbers and brings up that discussion. In this situation, it would not apply or help us with meeting our REIT numbers since it's outside the city limits, even though it may be a situation where we're providing some resources in support of it.
If I may tag along on that one, it would identify and help or assist the counties. And that's something that could be discussed if if this moves along and a successful conclusion happens where housing does take place, we can work with the county and say, hey, we help support to reduce your housing component or your ratio. And that gives us some benefit or leverage with the county as well and some other projects. Because we are accommodating projects in housing that they can't have the resources and the ability to.
All right, if no council member has additional questions, I'll open it up to the public. Thank you, Rod.
Thank you, Rod.
Anyone in the audience have questions regarding this agenda item? All right, crickets. We'll bring it back up here then, and I suppose I should entertain a motion.
You know what, just to get it out there, I would like to move adopting the accompanying resolution and authorize the city manager to sign the MOU.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? I will second. Dolores, may we have a roll call?
Councilmember Rodriguez?
I'm going to vote no. I'd like to explain my vote before I move on, if you don't mind. I feel like I just heard about this issue. I'm going to be very honest. I feel like I need some time to digest it, make a very good, clear decision. I want to talk to constituents. I want to really think about the pros and the cons. I see many of the merits of entering into this, but I just don't feel like, having had a short period of time, that I can honestly say that a week, a year, 10 years down the road, I can feel confident in my vote. So at this time, I'm going to say no, but I would certainly be open to hearing more about the topic and reconsidering at a later date.
Councilmember Stransky?
No.
Gonzalez?
I'll vote yes because it is just an MOU to study like we did with Pine Mountain.
Mayor Fun?
Yes. All right, so once again, the motion does not pass.
That's correct, but if we could, Madam Mayor, I'd like to return to the previous item because I believe I gave incorrect advice.
Okay.
I've just been consulting the manual of procedures that the city adopted, and in paragraph 7 is on voting, and it considers whether or not a member has disqualified themselves and left the room and what the effect of that is. And it provides that any council member who declares a conflict and leaves a room shall not be counted as part of a quorum and shall be considered absent for purposes of determining the outcome of the vote. And then in the preceding section on vote procedure, it provides that motions may be passed by a simple majority of the members present at a properly quorumed meeting unless otherwise required by the city ordinance or state law. So we had 3 members present, and it passed by a simple majority of 2 to 1.
And so 3 is considered a quorum?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so item 8A, which was...
I don't know what we were talking about.
That was the East Commercial Street Corridor.
I'm in the dark.
So item 8A, the East Commercial Street Corridor, was then actually adopted by the City Council, and that authorizes the city manager to prepare a master plan for future adoption. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Correct.
All right, but item B, the adoption of a resolution approving a non-binding MOU between the City of Willits and the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians regarding water service extension did not pass.
Can that come back at a certain point, or because of this it can't?
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Can item 8B come back at another time?
Yeah, if it comes back, or if it didn't.
I would be willing to second that as a council member, that I would like to see it come back at a later date, because I did have reservations and would like additional information.
It could come back, and there need not be a vote on that to allow it to come back in the future.
Thank you for that clarification.
I just want to member Rodriguez, I'm available.
We have a meeting tomorrow at 11, so.
I would gladly take the opportunity to discuss this with you.
Okay.
Thank you. Or any other council member? Extend that invite.
All right, do you have verbal reports?
Yes, I
Ryan?
do. I have one quick.
Thank you, Rod.
Thank you, Rod. One, I just want to put an announcement out there on Friday, July 21st at 8 a.m. The city is partnering with Blue Zones to hold a Complete Streets workshop. Basically, an invite went out to various stakeholders, agencies, other communities, other municipalities. And I'm throwing it out there for anyone in the public who has an interest in complete streets. What does that mean for both our community and other areas, and also to have their voice heard, because we're going to have policymakers and some elected representatives there. So I think it's a good opportunity. If you're interested in complete streets, traffic calming measures, and alternative transportation practices.
And what time?
8 a.m. to 4:30 at the community center.
So just for the public who may not know what complete streets means.
Complete streets is a concept where a street is designed and configured to accommodate as many different forms of transportation as possible. You're not designing streets to move the maximum amount of vehicles through it. You're looking at vehicles, you're looking at pedestrians, you're looking at cyclists, you're looking at other traffic calming. You're trying to introduce elements into that design of that street that it's a part of the landscape. It's not just this 6-lane highway going through a neighborhood. It's in context with its surroundings.
Thank you.
Yes. One other item, and I will point out to some other staff members and department heads that are present in the room. Unfortunately, last Thursday, we had one of those worst-case scenarios with a significant water break that impacted the whole community. It was one of the, it was the 5 alarm that went off, and crew both in the field worked diligently to get it under control. They reached out to external resources, i.e. with construction, with mobilized literally on a moment's notice to provide resources and equipment that we didn't have available. Administration staff were fielding calls all day long. It was basically as soon as the call was put down, someone else picked up another call. So I just want to point that out. I know Kathy's got some comments. Karen, did you want to say anything?
No, you kind of just took me.
I will never steal Karen's thunder. Scott, Olivia, like I said, it was a long hours. It was tough. We did learn from some of those items that we identified as we experienced that, as it unfolded, and we're going to implement them in the future. And once again, apologize to the general community for the disruption to the service, but it was not planned. So.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Karen Stevenson, your HR manager. I did want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the hard work and the efforts, not only of all of our crew. As Brian said, we had people answering phones, taking calls from customers who never talked to customers, who never talked to the public, and they all did phenomenal. The utility superintendent, Scott Herman, along with his water and wastewater folks, Kenan O'Shea and his streets and parks employees, our connection with WIF, our partnership with WIF was so phenomenal that they stopped a project that they were on in another area to come and assist us. Our police department was out there. Everybody was working together. There was smiles. We went out and fed them late in the evening, at the end of the day, and nobody was complaining. They were all smiling. They were working together. And we got it done in record time, as I believe we didn't think it was going to happen. But what, by 8 o'clock we were done, yes? Yeah. Which was phenomenal. And again, all of our efforts, everybody knew what to do. They pulled together. There wasn't any issue because one was from water or one was from wastewater. They got in the trenches. They did what they needed to do, and they make us very proud at what they were able to accomplish.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, city staff.
And Scott was reprimanded not to break any more to that extent in the future.
Can I ask a question to Scott, Brian? If we'd had our tank over here up and running, would that have added more, would there have been more water to go around, or would that have not have translated to much? Because I know you had a Hawthorne break and you had that one.
I think that would have supplied more volume, but we didn't have, the pump will only pump so many gallons a minute to provide enough water to backfeed. Yeah. So we had to shut it off at the vault, or slow it way down at the vault to accomplish what we had to do, because we had the main zone 3 million gallon tank offline repairing a valve at the senior center when this happened. So we couldn't open them up. So we had to backfeed. If we have a bigger pump, you know, maybe 400 or 500 gallons a minute from the groundwater plant could have sufficed us with little usage. You know, it's not a normal usage. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And is the reason that we have a lower grade pump contributed back to the decision that we made before, where we didn't want to buy a bigger one, or was that a separate issue? I'm just wondering if that was a decision that this council had made, or if that was connected to another.
We do actually. It's gonna, for installation hopefully this summer, is the 40 horsepower pump. So that should add additional gallons per minute. That would.
So the one that we approved recently will increase that.
Yep.
And so that would have helped the situation. Yes. How that had been.
Any little bit would have helped. I mean, we could have had have a little more volume going to the lower zones. But the corridor of Shell Lane and Bechtel Road at East Hill was already notified that they were going to be shut off. So they already knew they didn't have water. So it would have helped the rest of the community up to the vault, because again, the vault fed. The vault's a stopping point. It's a pressure reducing vault in front of the hospital. It brings the pressure from 130 down to 55, so it's manageable in the system. So beyond the vault to the east, everyone had water. And also the pressure zones, which are separate. So you have Maple Street or the Laurel area. You had Locust had water because they're separate from the main zone. So certain pressure zones still had water because they had tanks separate that didn't demand. They had storage basically that didn't demand off the main zone feeding in.
I can only imagine the pressure that everybody at the city was under to get this fixed quickly, from the people that were out in the field to those that are in the office answering the phones to those trying to maybe solve the problem behind the scenes. So thank you.
It was a great team effort, I must admit. It was all hands on deck, and made one phone call and everybody reacted. So it was stressful, fun to happen, that we can come together like that.
I was actually surprised that it was solved as quickly as it was, to be honest. I thought that it could drag out further.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say I lost track of how many calls and messages I got that day. And while they started out in the morning, what's wrong with my pressure? Why don't I have water? By the end of the day, they were overwhelmingly full of gratitude for the city for not only the communication, but for the excellent customer service in City Hall here and the incredible work by the crews out in the field. So I hope you all felt the appreciation from the community, because you were heroes. So please know that and pass that on to your crews.
And Mayor Connie, you did a good job of handling. I saw how many responses you fielded.
Thank you.
On social media. She was very, very responsive. It wasn't like there was many messages and then one final response. You were very quick to get back to everybody individually, and I thought that contributed to helping keeping people calm too. So,
thank you. Appreciate it.
One last item. I encourage everyone to have a great and fun evening at the hometown celebration coming up on Friday. Just be safe and be respectful to everyone.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to department recommendations. We have a possible resolution to approve a June revised budget adjustment for the fiscal years 22-23 and 23-24. This will be presented by our Finance Director, Manuel Orozco.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Manuel Orozco, Finance Director. I am providing this June revise as a kind of like an overall recap, what's been going on with the biannual budget, an economic outlook on like what's been happening with our revenues and expenses, and also kind of making adjustments and amendments in order to be able to kind of keep us above water and running smoothly. So one of the issues that we deal with is, as we look back at all the revenues and issues that may have changed, what we've done with the expenses and everything, and how that plays itself out in the end, and what things we can do to mitigate. So as I reviewed, I looked at all the different things that alter the revenues, which was the cannabis issue, the cannabis industry, which saw a very sharp dip in revenues, along with also kind of a dip in disposable cash within the community itself. So you can kind of see that play itself out in terms of what the sales tax revenue would have, what we experienced in sales tax revenue, which was much greater than what surrounding cities were. So there was that aspect of drop in revenue. Another thing was the revenues itself. Like I said earlier, there seemed to be an overall economic downturn within not only just this community, but also statewide. And it has to do with many different factors, including inflation and supply chain and other subcomponents that is just playing itself out. It just happens to be hitting us a little bit harder, a little bit faster. The next step was also looking at estimates, what is the exact impact that we can see? Because what we saw when I was looking at not only what we received for first quarter, second quarter, but also a preliminary third quarter, I can pull data out of the state website and actually start taking a look at like overall amounts. And so I saw this really weird, wild swing in that. What that means, I do not know. It actually makes me kind of interested to hear what Avenue Insights has to say about that when we start diving into the details and like what is exactly occurring. Was it an adjustment or was it something else? So after that, the changes that we made to the expenses, when we realized early on that things were not going as well as we thought they would go in terms of revenues, talked to everybody else to kind of a little bit hamper down expenses. And one of the directions was to kind of shore up and kind of get an idea of like, okay, what it is that we have to make sure that we maintain. Let's get that out the door, and that way we can get an idea of where we're at and what we can shave off. And so that created an interesting graph where there's a swing where we have an uptick in March of expenses while there's a drastic downrun of expenses, only to have that reverse completely in the next month. Now, I know that Brian likes my idioms. They call it frothy, where you don't exactly know what's going on. None of that tells you by any trend of what's happening. So I suggested to continue to kind of try and be conservative, and so a lot of the suggestions that I made within my June revise, which normally would be a May revise, but times we're getting a little tight and there's a lot going on. So I made a bunch of changes to our budget in terms of various different items. One of them, I can review that here because I don't have it on me. One component is CalPERS realignment adjustment. One of the things I noticed while I was looking at all the expenses and looking for ways in order to be able to save was also noticing that our CalPERS adjustment, or our CalPERS amounts that we pay for everybody within the organization was just being paid for by general fund. And that's an allocation that has various accounts throughout the city. So special revenue funds and enterprise funds were not actually paying
their share.
So I wanted to make that readjustment so that everyone had a version of their share kind of play itself out. And this was just on the UAAL subcomponent of that. So the next is adding different projects and making sure that we have that money set aside for one-time projects because we have one-time money. So looking at it, we had the vehicle operations, the rail trail project adjustment. Oh, no, that's not included in that. The civic plan and Apex server bill. The COVID relief to small businesses is a cleanup of prior funding that we had way back when. And basically what it was a program, I think Dave Dusty presented it a while back. And it's basically a program to help out small businesses through loans that could be forgivable. And that has utilized funds that we've held in accounts for a long period of time. We were able to utilize those funds, and get other funds from from CDBG. Sorry. And so with that comes a little bit of cleanup in the accounts. So I'm asking for the appropriations in order to be able to do that cleanup and register that. Tall tree contract is the one-time project. Engineering contracts is also a one-time to be able to shore up and and move our appropriations over to next year so that we're able to hold on to what we have. And then downtown Willits signage and the rail trail project adjustment, which is basically maneuvering the funds to be able to carry forward what we had in the past, because things are still moving along with that. So those are the adjustments, and some of them are meant to fix the fiscal ship or right size it. Others are just designed to do cleanup and things like that. So if you have any questions.
Anyone on council have questions? Jerry?
Sure.
So at what point, normally when we'd be doing the budget, and normally in May, we'd be like, okay, it's time to put on the brakes. Is there, what can you say if I ask you right now, is there anything we should be putting the brakes on, or does this accomplish?
This kind of accomplishes that. This is kind of our kind of term of putting on the brakes. There's going to be another adjustment sometime around like September, October-ish. I mean, kind of look at where we're at now and what's going on. So, but a lot of this is kind of more along the lines of we're still under in a lot of our allocation or our appropriations, and so what we can do is, because we're under, we don't need nearly as much of the Measure K dollars in order to be able to backfill from, for police or parks or other various projects that we're assigning to that. So we have that to carry forward, but that doesn't mean we carry all the appropriations forward. So those appropriations sweep, and then we work on new budgets for the next fiscal year. And those allocations then we will start looking at and revising that the revenues that were assessed at that, a year and a half ago. We're going to take a look at it again and say, was what we said feasible? Probably won't be, but we'll take a look at it early on.
And when do you expect to bring that back? I mean, I would assume it would be, don't buy this, don't fill this position.
Don't buy this, one-time things, kind of like, or identify certain things that we really shouldn't do. So.
And when do you think you'd bring that back to the council?
Sometimes around September, October.
Okay.
I have a whole system integration that I'm rocking on that point. So.
And are there intermediary steps with the different departments as far as, again, not buying things or filling certain things?
Yeah, there's quite a few like savings right now currently within various departments, and so we've kind of held back. And so far, a lot of our savings when it comes to the general fund is more along the lines of police officers and us having a staffing shortage, and it allowed for us to save from that mark. But then again, is that sustainable? We may need more Measure K funds in order to be able to cover that, but it's a savings as for now. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse. So.
All right, thank you.
Any other council members have questions for me?
No, I'm just thinking about Measure K in our last meeting and how this plays into that. And I think that the Measure K committee is eager to see what funds are going to be expended out of Measure K without getting them after the fact. They really want to kind of have more of a visionary approach, like this is really what we're going to be supporting. And I know for this first year, it sounds like it's going to be a little bit behind after the fact.
And my understanding of Measure K2 is that it's supposed to be to backfill, because police officers, we were so far down in our revenues that there was some threat to losing the police force or something like that. I'm not 100% exactly how that went about, but I know that there's some feel to that. And so, I would like to keep ourselves kind of mindful towards that, and then whatever savings we do get, we treat it as one time, use it for projects. Things that could be taken care of within the city that helps better everybody.
Manny, I know that you have set a goal of completing the audits by this fall of the years that are yet to be finalized, and I just wonder, I mean, we had sort of hoped that by doing a biennial budget that was going to free up your time so that you could focus on the audits, but now as the financial conditions out there get a little rockier than we anticipated, and then you're going to come to us, end of September, early fall with another revise, that seems to me that it's going to take away from your time to work on audits, and that pushes back Measure K's ability to make recommendations. And so I guess my question is, do you have the staffing you need to do all of the things that you have so ambitiously set to get done?
So I have brought in a contractor in order to be able to help me out with some parts of the implementation, reviews aspects of that. We are currently I wouldn't say we're in the final stretch, but we're almost done with our chart of accounts. By the end of this month, we'll have a chart of accounts for the new system ready to go. And end of this month. It's Friday anyway. So, and then after that, I start full swing on the audit when it comes to 2021 audit. And we'll have auditors here for 2 weeks reviewing books and everything like that from the 17th all the way to the 28th. My hope is that then soon after we get our audit kind of shored up at that point, and then we swing into the next, because we're running up into a barrier here that I want to be able to be done with, because the implementation will be halted because of books not being completed. So that's something that I definitely want to make sure that we have. So, like it or not, here I come.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I vote for a point of disclosure to the council, one item on there, the tall tree contract amendment for $75,000 was already signed off administratively, mistakenly on my part. That is part of the West Mendocino Phase 1 project. We are just looking at to close out the Phase 1 project. We'll be starting in earnest. I just want to make that clear to the council right now. And we're looking at what we would do as part of phase 2. We haven't got to that point yet, but Olivia's presence now, we're just reevaluating the on-call contracts and agreements.
And you said 75,000, but this says 70.
75,000.
Okay. So this memo had it.
Does it say?
It says 70.
Okay. The submission that Manny provided, it's 75,000.
Okay. On the staff report?
Yes. And the summary.
Indeed. Okay. So yeah, the memo that was sent out this morning was just wrong. Okay. Thank you. All right. Anything else from Manny? Anyone? If not, then I believe we need a motion. Oh, would anybody from the public like to make any comments or ask any questions regarding this mid-year revise? Okay, back to the dais, and I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve I make a motion to adopt the resolution to approve the June revised budget adjustment for fiscal years 2022-23 and 2023-24 as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Dolores, may we have a roll call?
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Pani?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We have department monthly reports, which are presented each month at the end of the month. And our first is from Airport. Kathy, have you anything to add to your written notes?
I don't, but I would like to reassure you that we have had some challenges at the airport recently, but I'd like to assure the council that we are working through those and have faith that will all turn out the way it should.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Community development, Dusty, anything to add?
Oh, just a few things. Thank you, Mayor Connie. You'll note that we have a significant number of code enforcement cases that were open last month. This is unfortunately not untypical, and the majority of them are related to the vegetation abatement fire hazard matter that we spoke to a little bit at the last meeting that I think council is generally familiar with. The good news is, as of today, I think all but 3 or 4 of those vegetation fire hazard related matters have been abated. And of course, unfortunately, we've had to continue further code enforcement actions for those few property owners that still have a little bit of work to do.
Quick question. I noticed that along the train tracks, the abatement is generally done, which is wonderful. But I have had a few comments about why they didn't just get that last little bit underneath the train cars themselves. Is it because we were trying not to if it was us that did the work?
It wasn't.
It wasn't us. Okay. It was another party. Okay. Well, that in itself will be sufficient. People just want to know, like, why didn't they finish the job? Because it's all the way up to the rail, but they didn't finish that last little bit.
We need to run out of gas.
That's what it looks like.
That's not really.
Okay. Okay.
Moving on, we had a wonderful team effort moment in community development. Luckily, it wasn't spurred by an emergency, but it was wonderful to see the full team that makes up the community development department come together. And we had a few days where we were really focused in on finishing up the submission of the Caltrans Clean California local grant submission. So council's familiar, we came forward with a number of ideas to include in that grant, and also happy to report that a number of the improvements that we identified, new bathroom, basketball courts, public art, a pavilion to support the farmers market and other potential uses were identified in that grant. Ultimately, it came out to $2.77 million in estimated improvements for the city. It's a very highly competitive grant series, but really due to the fact that the council had invested in the community development department, we have a full and talented staff. We put together, in my opinion, an application. Again, we're competing with LA, San Diego, all of them across the state, but we put together a legitimate application that meets the scoring criteria, meets the intent of the grant. So as those folks are pouring through a number of, I'm sure, splendid applications, ours has an opportunity to shine, and if there's folks that are seeing the merit in what we put forward, they can give us the points we need to get there. So we're supposed to find out in September, and that's why we're keeping our fingers crossed, but very proud of the team and how we work together to get that grant submitted. And then lastly, in the update here, I wrote that we would be working with finance to identify funding to support the Caltrans downtown signage. This guy right here helped me out today, and we got that done and signed that standard agreement and sent it off to Caltrans. So I'll keep the council updated, but hopefully we'll have those downtown Willits signages that we've been asking for a number of days now. Installed soon. So I don't have a timeline for that, but so again, these are signs noting downtown Willits, both at the northern interchange in both travel directions, as well as again, these are just standard Caltrans, green and white lettered signs. Not as cool as a pinwheel, but there'll also be one at the Highway 20 part, letting travelers know that downtown Willits is to the left.
You got to feel the love for the pinwheels.
And yeah, unless council has some questions, that's all at one time.
Thank you. Your department has been incredibly busy these last weeks and months. A lot of forums, a lot of work going into the housing element. So thank you for working on these ancillary projects as well and keeping everything moving. Much appreciated. All right, engineering.
Hello.
Hi.
I have nothing additional to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
So I guess the note, though, the reformatted June report will contain everything under one report. Is that what we should anticipate?
There will be one, the utilities will be separate,
okay.
Which Scott composes, but services and facilities will include basically what we accommodate for public works, and then engineering or capital improvement projects.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, we won't pick on you since you're just...
I'm ready to be picked on.
Anybody from council have questions for Olivia?
Although this report is from May, technically, so I wasn't here, so I really don't know.
That was no disclaimer. It's yours. I found that out.
Anyone? We'll move on then to Finance Department. Manny, do you have anything to add?
Nothing really to add. I think I've already said that we'll have auditors here next month, so that will be exciting and makes us move.
Council, anyone? Police.
Was it finance or transportation that I told you I wasn't going to be here on the 27th? Which meeting is on July 20? Is it
Transportation.
Transportation, okay. Because it's that meeting that we're going to need another council member to fill in for, because I won't be present.
Thank you.
I forget that.
Okay. Chief, anything to add to your police report?
Nothing really to add to the report, but just as something that I didn't put on here. As we all know, Hometown Celebration is going to be this Friday. The word was, the messaging was supposed to be out already, but just in case for people watching and listening, the Main Street is going to be closed out between Commercial and Wood, and the detour around that is going to take it up to North Street as opposed to South Street. North Street is a little bit wider.
So it'd be a little bit easier for traffic to make the turns and get through there as quickly as possible. It's going to be the same thing for Tuesday the 4th, when we close off for the parade and everything. We're going to route everybody through up to North Street. We're going to put up the no parking signs on Saturday. We'll start on Friday night and then finish up on Saturday. South Street will not be affected this year on that.
Do you mean School Street?
School Street.
Which street?
School Street?
School Street. I said South Street?
Yes, School is normally where the parade.
Got a compass on my head. Yeah, School Street, I'm sorry. That will not be affected, but it will be blocked off, so we don't have cars, traffic coming in through there. And we're trying to get the message out as far as the no parking as soon as we can, because we've had some issues in the past. So we've got brand new luminescent, fluorescent parking signs that are easier to see, and we'll be putting those out starting Friday night and then into Saturday as well to finish it up, so everybody will have plenty of notice. If you go to Hometown Celebration, PD is going to have a table set up. Stop by, talk to the officers. We've got some goodies for the kids and stuff, so we're hoping everybody has a really good time. And if you have any questions on the report.
Will you have your parade detour map in the paper so people know?
Frontier Days is supposed to get that up. I think Willis Weekly comes out tomorrow. It should be on there.
Okay.
And it we'll also post it on our department's Facebook page.
I want to make Dusty's working on a clarification. We're verifying. I believe the Hometown Celebration detour is on Humboldt.
On Humboldt?
Dusty's looking at the encroachment permit traffic control plan right now.
Yeah, because normally you close down Mendocino and you route traffic around.
Yeah. Well, this time they wanted the Main Street closed off completely.
That was going to be my question. I was a little confused over that change.
Yeah, and they wanted it. The hours were too long when between Dusty and ourselves. We complained enough that they shortened the hours. I think it's going to be from 3 to 9 or something like that. 3 to 11.
3 to 11 is what I've read online.
So from 3 to 11, a portion of Main Street is going to be closed on Friday?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think that, I wasn't aware of that, and nobody I know is aware of that, and I think that's kind of a big deal. I'm a little surprised that, honestly, I'm a little surprised that we didn't know, or maybe didn't even give any thoughts about it. Did they?
You and me both. I'm a Main Street merchant, and I didn't know that.
I'm just wondering how this request came about, and I mean, that's pretty significant to the city.
It is, and it went through Taylor. Is that her name? Is that who was dealing with that?
Yeah, it came through the Community Development Department as a request, and it was routed out to the various staff before finally issuing the encroachment permit for the closure.
And who's doing all the where it's blocked off? I mean, do you have volunteers?
Volunteers.
The organizers are responsible for putting up, taking down, as well as staffing the various barricades. And then it was the applicant that took on the responsibility of notifying local businesses. I've heard a couple different stories about how that went down. Very much related, I'll just say that one of the tasks that we're taking on now is developing an ordinance that speaks to how we go about permitting special events, including situations like this. So,
good idea.
I'll be the first one to say there's a little bit of room for improvement.
And I just want to also comment on that as a follow-up. I know it's after the fact, but I have a meeting tomorrow with the chamber director or coordinator, just so before we get an ordinance in place, that when groups entities propose events of this nature that are going to impact beyond just a small, simple area, that there's some type of coordinating meeting between the city, or the city would help facilitate between the different entities, the applicant, so we can just go through a checklist. Did we get notices out? Did we get notices out? Did we talk to people? Did we get notices out? Does people understand? Like I said, lessons learned. Once again, we're doing the best we can. We don't have a defined ordinance. Like Dusty noted, we're going to be putting one forward because there are events coming forward. Community groups are active. They want to have events. They think it's a platform for them to promote the community. And we want to encourage that, but we have to do it in a balanced approach.
I will say that, prior to the bypass, there was a lot of discussion about how much easier it would be to have community festivals when the city had ownership of Main Street instead of Caltrans. So I appreciate that this is the first time doing this, and there will definitely be growing pains. I'm glad to note that you're acknowledging that there's room for improvement, so I trust that the city will come up with a good plan for future events.
And you're not alone, because part of why I wanted to bring it up to the general public as well was I have gotten a couple calls from the business merchants who were not fully made aware of how this was going to go down and stuff, and they had a lot of concerns about it. So.
Just to finally note, there has been coordination with PD and the fire department, and we are maintaining emergency access throughout the event. So while it is shut off to regular traffic, emergency service providers will maintain the traffic.
So should need be, there's room for them. Right.
So is the School Street parking lot going to be available for people to park? In the past, during the downtown, that's been kind of a spot for folks to get into. It sounds like you might not be able to get to it.
Yeah, you'll be able to go up Wood Street, but you'll have to park before noon.
Yeah.
To chance at a space.
If you go up West Commercial, we are going to be putting up barricades on School Street and stuff, so you may not have access. But if we have volunteers, which we're supposed to have staffing those barricades, they can always let people through to the parking lots.
Well, so I just said to Jerry, people will be able to go up Wood Street, and that's what I've been telling my customers, because they've been concerned about Main Street being closed right at Main and Wood. But will Wood actually be open?
Wood should be open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the barricades will be on the north side.
On the north side, yes.
Okay, intersection. Yeah. Okay. Sabrina, did you have another question?
Well, I think that's important too, because I was just thinking about public transit, MTA that's within their route, and I'm just wondering about the path that they're going to be traveling and whether or not they'll be able to hit their stops.
I don't know how many stops they have in that area, but...
Well, there's one right in front of JD Red House.
They're not going to get to that.
Going northbound, so I would imagine that they need to let their usual pickup or drop-offs know that they're not going to be able to stop there.
And to pick them up somewhere else.
That's something to consider. And then when they pick up, because I know that they've got during those hours, they've got regular drop-offs and pickups right here going that direction and coming back, both east and west.
Mm-hmm.
What roads are they going to take to go around to be able to get back to Commercial Street?
They can go up, they'll be able to go up Commercial and go up to North Street and go down to Pine and then come down. And then
how will they get back? Which street will bring them back onto the Main Street?
There'll be two-way traffic on that detour. They'll be able to get back that way.
Well, because you can't here's the problem you have when you take that detour route. The reason
it's a large bus. So
a large bus. If you get a large bus and a mobile home going through that S-turn, that's why in the past we actually had people stopping traffic during the 4th, so that if you had that situation, and that's why in the past we didn't use that as kind of an alternate, because it was labor intensive.
Okay.
Well, the thing also I think you need to think about is if the route for the bus is down Pine, then they're potentially missing 2 stops. They're missing the one in front of JD Red House and the one in front of the title company right before you get to East Mountain. So that's significant for a bus user.
And if there's a significant delay here on going either directions, I'm just thinking, I know some of the people that ride the bus, and that could leave them stranded. So I'm just thinking that maybe I'll be reaching out to MTA first thing in the morning and saying, hey, we need to connect with the city and come up with
see what they've been told. And
a quick plan. They haven't been told anything. I'm the chair for
Mendocino
Transit Authority, and we weren't aware of it.
Great, okay.
Yeah, so.
And we'll work with MTA or whatever as getting them as close as we can. But once that section is closed off, we're going to have to find alternative places for them to pick up and drop off. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the businesses. I have 100 kids across the street whose parents typically pick up during 3 to 5, and they're all going to be trying to get there and making sure that they're informed like other businesses are, trying to figure out how to educate people on alternative paths to ensure that they're arriving at their destinations on time. Okay. Thank you.
Chief, before you sit down, I just wanted to say in my neighborhood, actually on my block a couple of nights ago, there was an arrest made, and it was very loud, which is fine. But what I wanted to say was that the officer who made the arrest was so patient and had an incredible manner in a very difficult situation where the person was not comprehending what was happening. And I was very impressed, and a couple of my neighbors mentioned the same thing. So I didn't know who the officer was, but I'm sure you will know, and it was very well handled, and community members noticed.
Thank you, that's good to hear. We did have a couple of arrests over the weekend that were not very subtle in their execution, but I've gotten some very good feedback as to how it was handled, and it wasn't, they did just enough to get the person into custody as opposed to going overboard. So it's good to hear, and it's good that the community is recognizing that these guys are working hard, but they're working within the limits that we placed as far as working with the community and partnering and being sensitive to people's needs.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Public Works.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Nothing further to add outside of the information provided in your monthly report packet, but I did want to kind of shed a little information on what I assume the detour route will also probably include Humboldt Street.
That's my understanding.
So that there'll be alternate routes on both sides of Main Street.
Excellent.
So it won't, and it's only a few blocks, so it's not as extensive as the parade route all the way to West Valley.
Okay, good to know.
And this is the first attempt, so that, like Dusty and the chief alluded, there's some kinks to work out, but we think it'd be for the betterment of the community if we can pull this off and we can make this happen. I'm sure it'll open the door for further events in the future. So please bear with us while we work through this process and look for better checks and balances in the future.
Sounds like the intent is good. We're just a little taken off guard.
Thank you, Kennedy.
Absolutely, thank you. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
You good, Jerry?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on to utilities.
Yeah, just one update. It's been about a year and a month. The new Chevy trucks will be delivered tomorrow.
You mean the bow ties?
So it was supposed to be delivered today, but I got an email late this afternoon that said it'll be tomorrow.
Of course, because they're Chevys, so they're late.
Just in time for the 4th of July with a brand new truck.
Just for Larry to ride on.
That's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Once again, huge thanks and kudos to the crew for this last week. All right, council, any questions, comments for Scott? Okay, that wraps up our department monthly reports. Thank you so much to everyone who puts them together. They are incredibly useful. City council announcements, communications reports. Sabrina.
Had a long MTA meeting today, lots of planning going on, and Larry, we were talking about the size of what our vision is for MTA. You know, people have talked about the long bus versus the short bus, and where are we headed and what brand, and how can we purchase buses that that are eco-friendly and also serve our needs. And I have to say that Chevy came into the conversation as our saving grace when it came to a small vehicle that could provide a mode of transportation that had the potential to be electric. That they're kind of like our hope, because none of the other makers out there are really excelling at it. So, good job. Keep cheering on for them. No, but seriously, yesterday there was a meeting. I was surprised. A lot of people were surprised how many people attended. Were you on that meeting about the mobility that had to do with? So it had to do with Brook Trails, Covelo, Laytonville, Potter Valley, and Hopland. And there's been this study that's been going on. Lots of people have been talked to in the various communities and had an opportunity to put their ideas and their concerns forward about how to solve the concern that there isn't enough transportation in the outlying areas. And so they presented their plan. And although the plan has many challenges, it also, really has got the community and organizations thinking outside of the box. And MTA is going to be significantly impacted by any decision that MCOG makes on the matter. So there's a meeting on August 14th. I will be there speaking to represent MTA. When the mobility study initially started, I raised concerns, as many others did, that we're doing a study on the needs, but we haven't found the funding. And there was a worry that ultimately we would be requesting potentially a reduction of funding to MTA. And now we've seen the report, and it has become evident that some of those fears are in fact, potential. MTA is facing the potential that they may have a 5% taken away from their budget. And as you can imagine, if somebody said they were going to take away 5% of the city's budget, that would certainly have an impact on us. So it is sending ripples through that organization and trying to figure out what services may or may not be cut. So we talked a little bit about what services could potentially be cut. There's special events. So for example, for us, special events are pretty minor. MTA does our parade, and that's about it for special events. But for Ukiah, there are, during the holiday season, there's the trolley that runs. That probably would get axed. If you live over in Fort Bragg, right now we've restored services to run twice a day. Drop that down to one time a day, so that would limit access for people trying to get from the coast over to Ukiah to be able to have access to health care or shopping or whatever the case may be. In the Ukiah area, they might see potentially the impact where if you go to ride a bus, generally the bus comes every half an hour. If we have to change up our times and figure out how to be more financially efficient rather than really truly meeting the need of the customer, the bus might only come once an hour. That can have an impact if you're trying to figure out how to get to work or get to school or get to an appointment. An hour can be a significant impact. The upside is it would give us an opportunity to be able to provide some sort of services to Covelo, Laytonville, and the other areas that I mentioned before. So it's this whole juggle of pros and cons. And then we'll also be having the conversation about should MTA be it's MTA's business to, and they're professionals at handling transportation, should they be in charge if it is decided that we need to provide services to these areas? Will MTA be providing the services, or will there be a 5% taken away from MTA and we'll give it out to various organizations who may be able to provide services in unique ways that a larger transportation organization can't? But then will they do it well? Where will the accountability be? And will the needs of the people truly be served? So there's so many variables and so many, has the potential to really impact Willits because we're so connected with Brook Trails and some of our neighbors. So lots of deep discussions on how we're going to make this all happen. And then on top of that, we're in the middle of labor negotiations, and we're working on our transit plan because Ukiah has a transit transfer station coming in that we're working on, still putting together that plan. And we're actively working on making sure that we can meet the zero emissions goals that are set forth by the state. So just a whole lot of planning like that of the city of Willits. So planning, so yeah.
Any comments about the finance meeting we went to last week?
I'm so meeting, like, let me think for a minute. Can you come back to me on that? Give me a second to digest MTA. MTA was a lot.
Yes, that was a long one today.
It was a lot, and it was very, very important, like with our planning that we're doing. Like there's a lot of thought that's going into coming up with plans and solutions that work for the short term, the long term, and benefit the masses and the most vulnerable. So just so much going into that.
So think about if you have anything you'd like to add about the either finance or transportation.
Sounds good.
Last week.
It was busy too.
Yes. Larry, do you have anything you'd like to report? No. Okay. Jerry?
Nope.
Okie doke. Last week I attended the first one was the Finance Committee meeting on Wednesday. We heard updates from Manny regarding where we were with the audits. We heard about the policies that he'd like to enact this year. And that's my notes from the finance meeting, which was short and sweet. We had a transportation meeting the following day. That was where we got our first chance to get to know Olivia. She had some updates for us on the Lenora Street project, which is going to be happening later this summer. We're happy to hear that some of the comments that council members made at the previous transportation meeting before she was even here have been incorporated into the design. So that's we're grateful for that and excited to have her eyes on these projects going forward. And just appreciating that the Transportation Committee is getting its feet under it, and hopefully we're going to have some real ability to help direct new policies and potentially new sidewalk ordinance. So just it feels like some good work is going to get done in the committee.
I was surprised, to be honest, Olivia, I was very surprised at how quickly you hit the ground running. And how comments from the previous committee you had already started to work on potentials for changes for improvement. Government always works so slow, and it was nice to see that those ideas were already moving forward. So
absolutely,
yeah, I think that was the thing that stood out the most for me. Yeah. And then a reminder that I will not be at the next meeting. I need a fill-in.
Yes. So Jerry or Larry, since you are the two here tonight, would either of you like to serve as an alternate for the next transportation meeting to take Sabrina's place?
July 27th.
It's the last Thursday of the month. I believe it's the 27th.
It'll be at 9 a.m. here at City Hall. Any interest, either of you? If not, we can tag Madge, who's not here.
You know, I might, but it's a Thursday?
Yes.
Thursday morning.
I don't know, but we have a council meeting that 20.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Council meeting.
All right.
Do you need a second council member in order for that committee to?
You know, no formal action, but once again, it's an ad hoc committee, so it's more advisory. At this stage, we don't have a lot of items to bring back for, you know, formal action.
I might be able to do it. I just
My hope is that we'll have a really, really long council meeting the night before, and so then a 9 a.m. meeting the next day will be, you know, very thrilling.
Remind me at that council.
That sounds like Jerry's going to try to take my place.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that wraps up council reports. Anybody have any good and welfare?
We have the Arts Walk.
Yes.
On Saturday, so please come and walk Commercial Street from the Art Center down to the museum. There will be guided tours talking about art. There'll be musicians. The Art Center has some events that are going on there as well. It's the first of several arts walks. July is kind of like the first attempt at it. And then August is the big one on August 5th, where all of the, or most of the commercial street businesses are going to participate on the August 5th.
Great. And of course, we have July 4th coming up, Independence Day, and probably more so even than October. It definitely feels like our community's homecoming. It'll be exciting to welcome visitors and past residents back to town to celebrate the 4th. I hope everyone has a happy, healthy, and safe 4th. And we have no closed session tonight, so at exactly 8:40, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.